Okay, we are live. Thank you for waiting for us just a few minutes. It's 1:33 and we're going to get started. Let's make some quick introductions. My name is Adam Slipakoff and I'm the managing partner of MyAtlLaw, which is Slipakoff and Slumka. And we do, well, we'll talk about what we do. We do a little bit of bankruptcy work, we do family law, litigation, corporate, and we really want to be Atlanta's lawyers. So this is Adria.
And I am the public relations and marketing intern. I do some stuff with social media. So we're here today to talk about celebrity bankruptcies and any questions you guys might have legally related to your favorite celebrities.
Yeah. Well, we're glad to have everybody here. So here's what we're going to talk about. There are some bankruptcies that are in the news, and some of them are, well, how do I say, famous. Some are good stories, some are bad stories, everybody knows there's some stories like famous ones. Tony Braxton filed for bankruptcy.
Good one.
You think of Vanilla Ice. You think of Mike Tyson. Now, these guys had situations where they had a very rapid rise and then a very big fall. But that is not what makes up every bankruptcy. Bankruptcies are there to help people. And there are a lot of people that use the legal protection of bankruptcy. They structure it in a way that allows them to emerge much stronger. And there's a lot of very wealthy people today, famous folks, that have used those laws.
Yep.
So, tell you what, let's talk about a couple. Now, obviously, I think we're going to start with one of the most famous ones in the news today. Let's talk about Donald Trump.
Obviously, Donald Trump.
Yeah. Now, Donald Trump, he's obviously very wealthy. And there is even a great story of him telling his daughter Ivanka, and they were walking down the street in Manhattan, and they see a homeless man, and they say, he says to her, "See that man? He's wealthier than I am." Now, look, it's a little bit of tongue-in-cheek because what he's suggesting is he had so much debt on his companies that he had a zero net worth. But, of course, he owned billions and billions of assets, hotels in Atlantic City and in New York. But the fact is, the amount of debt was here and the amount of the equity in those was here at that time. That's what happens. Economic cycles go up and they go down, and the values go up and down. But ultimately, the market has rebounded. New York City property values are very high, and he is probably now wealthier than that man he saw on the street.
Definitely.
Yeah. Now that he is president, there's a lot of people that, some people realize that he filed for bankruptcy, and some say, well, no, actually he didn't. So let's cover this myth, right? Did Donald Trump personally file for bankruptcy ever? The answer is no. He did not file for personal bankruptcy, not once. What he did was, he has a lot of companies. As you can imagine, somebody who is very wealthy would hire lawyers, like us, perhaps. And what we would do is we would structure a company holding structure where, one company owns, let's say, this casino, another company owns that hotel, and it was those entities that used bankruptcy protection on a couple of different occasions. So, do you know what some of those hotels are? Any of the famous ones you could think of?
I know there's like the Trump Hotel, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's obviously one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's, are talking about ones that aren't related to Trump at all that filed for bankruptcy, or ones that he owned?
Well, there's, even thinking about the various hotels that he had, he had a lot of casinos in, Atlantic City, so he had the Taj Mahal. The Taj Mahal is very famous. He also had Trump Tower. Now, Trump Tower is a hotel in Manhattan, and then he also has Trump International.
It's a lot of different Trump this and that.
Right.
That's how I keep it straight.
Right. And what he did, though, is later, as he became even more and more famous, he actually licensed out his name. So he does not even have any of the debt or equity of the hotel operations. He simply gets paid a licensing fee for the use of his name. And that's what's happening more and more these days. He is not building as many hotels on his own. But here's what happened back in 1990. So people like to joke and say that he started with, a $1 million loan from his father, and he called it small.
I've heard that. Yeah. He got some backlash for saying that it was just a small $1 million loan.
Yeah. And it's funny. $1 million in 1970 compared to $1 million today, people don't always take into account inflation. So what is $1 million worth in 1970 versus today? Today, it'd be about $4 or $5 million.
Mm-hmm.
So It was $1 million then, and don't get me wrong, it's still a lot of money either way. But $5 million also ups it if you were to use today's dollars. But he used that and to build a couple of other buildings. But here, he started the Taj Mahal in 1990, and the Taj Mahal filed for bankruptcy. So get this is terrible for him. It opened in April 1990, and then only 6 months in, it ended up closing. Not closing, my apologies. It went into bankruptcy. Now, and that's a great misnomer. People think bankruptcy means you throw it all out there and you just walk away from your debts and you lose. But that's not at all what happened. See, in the Chapter 11 corporate bankruptcy, you got to think about all the famous companies that have gone through this. You've got GM, Delta Airlines.
Yep.
So many famous companies have gone through that process. In fact, the city of Detroit is going through a bankruptcy of such right now. But it is meant so that you emerge stronger. The word bankruptcy kind of has a bad connotation. Creditors, loan companies, credit card companies, they like to suggest that it's an immoral thing, or your morality should keep you from filing because of course it benefits them. You got to realize that bankruptcy law goes all the way back, not just to our Constitution, but believe it or not, it actually goes back to, I kid you not, the Bible.
Really, yeah.
Yeah, there is a reference in Deuteronomy, and I'm going to find this and tell you actually what it says, because I think it's really compelling.
I think I've heard of that one before, something about not loaning money or not doing something or other, so people might see it as like a taboo thing.
Right, exactly. If someone finds that it is immoral, well, read Deuteronomy, and I'm not someone who's in the habit of always quoting Bible verse, but listen to this. Deuteronomy 15:1-2 says, "At the end of every 7 years, thou shalt make a release. And this is the manner of release. Every creditor shall release that which he has lent unto his neighbor and his brother, because the Lord's release hath been proclaimed." The idea is, and it's funny, 7 years. That's fascinating because 7 years is often the time period for a lot of what we call statutes of limitations, where if somebody in Georgia, the statute of limitations is on a contract is exactly 7 years. So if you use your credit card, and the last time you used it was 2010, let's say June 4th, 2010, 7 years ago today, and you never use it afterwards, and you don't pay on that bill, well, after 7 years, the credit card company cannot sue you after that. They have that 7 years to try to collect the money, but after that, it is gone. They can't use the legal process. Because just like the Bible and our Constitution and our laws today, we are designed to have a system where you should be able to grow past a bad situation that happened one time in your life. Like, you don't always have to. If someone makes one mistake, you should be able to get past that.
Yeah.
Making 2 or 3. There are time periods where you pay your penance, you pay off a debt, if there's a criminal act, you serve a reasonable amount of time. But then you get to get on with your life again.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of misconceptions that people have about bankruptcy, is that if they do file for bankruptcy, they're worried about completely ruining themselves and not being able to bounce back from that, which is not true, All these different celebrities, Trump is an example, are people that have filed for bankruptcy maybe, more than once, and they've still managed to bring their wealth back or get back to a good place.
Right.
So,
now, I'm going to go back to Trump in a minute, but I also want to talk about not just other celebrities, but if you think about this, what are some of the most trustworthy presidents? Because you think about Donald Trump, and he didn't file for personal bankruptcy. And the idea to some people is appalling. How can we have a president that filed for bankruptcy? I mean, that's a really problematic thing for a lot of people. But name, what presidents do you think that people trust the most? Who would you say are the most honorable names?
George Washington, Abe Lincoln. I've heard he filed for bankruptcy.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Abe Lincoln filed for bankruptcy twice. Not once, twice. When he had started off his law practice, he wasn't terribly successful at first. And it took time for him to grow, and he tried other business ventures that just did not take off. And then it wasn't, of course, until 1960 when he was elected president that he became that iconic figure that we all know and love. But everybody has a period in their life where they are growing and they have to try new things. So he did twice, and get this, Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah.
Thomas Jefferson filed for bankruptcy also twice. A lot of folks just do not remember. It's like 200 years ago, so it's understandable. But this is embedded in the Constitution. Now, let's go back to Donald Trump. So the hotel, that one filed for bankruptcy, the casino did. And that's not all. There are, in fact, 6 bankruptcies that he was a part of. So the other one were other 2 Atlantic City hotels, and those filed bankruptcy in 1992. Now, you have to realize that back in 1990 and 1992, those were hard times. When he was considering buying those hotels, it was the booming 80s. You could see Atlantic City was the place to go, and so he put a lot of time and energy into buying them. But then a lot of things crashed in 89, 90 through 92. And here's why bankruptcy works in some circumstances. When you can't get a deal with your creditors, and he was taking out billions, or I should say hundreds of millions at that time, hundreds of millions of dollars in loans, and they just simply said, pay us back everything all today, all at once. Not everybody can do that. Bankruptcy is there as it's a way to force your creditors to be reasonable. Because imagine if you have a $200,000 mortgage, and for some reason you're in technical breach of your mortgage. Your lender calls you and says, sorry, but you didn't send in your tax payment on time, or you didn't get insurance that's required, one of these little technical defaults. And they say, sorry, we're going to force you to sell the whole thing. The vast majority of us would look around and say, well, that's why I have a loan. I can't pay you for this.
People can't afford to pay it all up front. They have to have some type of option so that they can pay it over time or even reduce the debt, or just completely erase it.
Right. And you may have millions of assets, but in this case, you could have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of equity. But if you have all that equity, the only way to tap into it usually is, one, to get a loan. Well, everyone knows. Banks don't want to lend money to somebody right when they need it the most. That's the whole point. They want to make sure that you have that ability. And if you are so needing it, they're going to see that as a sign of risk. And there's that old adage. They want to loan you money when you don't need it, and they don't want to lend you money when you need it. So that covers those. Now let's talk about some of the other filings that he made. In 2004, okay, he had $1.8 million of debt, or billion, in debt for Trump hotels and casinos. And on those, I mean, you're talking about there were hundreds and hundreds of employees, and there were millions in retirement accounts, and his creditors were just saying, look, we want to get paid back. Now, regardless of what your politics are, whether you like him as a person, whether you don't, whether you like him as a business person or not, I have to say that it was smart of him that he didn't personally take out any of these debts. Mm-hmm. He had other people, either companies or individuals, that would either loan him money or they were responsible. They were the security for them. And when it came time to keep making those regular payments, 2004 was another very difficult time in the economy, and he just wasn't able to keep up. Because, look, economic cycles. The last one is the Plaza Hotel. The Plaza Hotel, it has been an icon in New York City, right across from Central Park. Mm-hmm. And, of course, for it, 2000 and, what was that year that the Plaza, the Plaza was in 1992. Another bad economic cycle, didn't have the same type of attendance and occupancy, so they had to file. So, anyway, that covers Donald Trump, but let's cover a couple of other famous folks. So, who do you want to talk about next?
I think Johnny Depp is one that's really big in the news right now. He's obviously gone through a divorce.
Right.
He has spent a lot, way outside of his means. He's obviously wealthy, but even somebody who's wealthy can find themselves being excessive. And I think that we found some information about the amount of money that Johnny Depp spends, just hiring people and some of the luxuries he has. So if you could kind of share some of those, it's very interesting. Okay, now Johnny Depp
it is a hilarious story as long as you're not Johnny Depp or someone who lent money or paid money to Johnny Depp. Now, Johnny Depp, to be clear, has not filed for bankruptcy yet. I think he will. I think he's going to need to. And it also kind of explains why there was a new movie out. See, just last weekend, I took the kids and my wife, we saw Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yes, love it.
Yeah, we loved it. And we're thinking, I thought the last one was going to be the last. 4, or what was it, 5? Was it?
I don't
even know what number we're on.
Now?
I think this is the 5th.
I think it's the 5th.
So we're thinking, okay, the 4th we thought tied up all the loose ends. There's nothing else. But it turns out we know why. And I think there's going to be a 6th also. So now again, Johnny Depp is just a great story of excess. And it's not us. It is not your average person. It's not a client. I certainly don't have any clients that spend like this or have had issues like this. But these are entirely self-inflicted wounds. So let me give you an idea of what we're talking about, all right? So I've got here, this is the filing made on January 31st. Let's see, we'll put it up there for you to see.
It's legit.
Yeah. This is the Superior Court filing by his management team. So here's a little bit of the backstory. Johnny Depp, back in 1999, hired a group called, TMG. Very, very famous management group that manages the finances of stars. And TMG has been with him since 99. We're talking almost 17 years. But along that way, Mr. Depp had run up, well, let's put it this way. He was paid $600 million for all of his various movies and appearances and endorsements. Out of that $600 million, TMG was entitled to a certain percentage, and over the years they've gotten about close to $30 million. So they get almost roughly 5%. So they've done well having this client over time. But here's where that relationship, you would think it would be so strong and everyone would be so happy together, it can go awry. Johnny Depp was spending far more than he had. At one point, he had had a loan to someone else, perhaps of ill repute, who was not willing to give him any extension, not willing to do any deals with him. And when that happens, a lot of people may file bankruptcy, so you can force your creditor to work with you. But this is Johnny Depp. He didn't want to do that. So he turns to his management company and says, can you loan me the $5 million? I would love it, by the way, if you wouldn't mind one day, if I asked you, hey, Adria, could you loan me $5 million?
If I had $5 million, which I wish I did, but
you would give it to me?
If it depends, like what the loan was with the interest. If there was a high interest rate,
wow,
maybe.
She is a very good person. She would loan $5 million. Well, at that point, though, that wasn't even enough. They were fine to give him the $5 million, but he could see the writing on the wall. He was still spending more than he was making. And there came a point where they said, look, Johnny, you've got all these assets. You have, here, I'm going to go down the list of them. This is where it gets funny. But TMG said, look, we have to get some of our money back, right? Let us at least take some of these 70 collectible guitars. Let us have some of the 200 collectible art pieces.
There were like a bunch of jets, like 7 jets or something like that, private jets.
He will not travel other than by private jet. And how about his 150-foot luxury yacht that he paid $75 million for? He has 45 luxury vehicles. You could see that it would be a little bit of a slap in the face to TMG, who loaned him $5 million, and he says, I'm not going to give it back to you, but yet I'm going to keep these 45 cars in a garage that I don't use, and these 14 residences that I don't use. So TMG said, look, we need to go after you. I'm sorry. We still like you. Perhaps, I'm assuming that's how it goes. So you know who the first one to fire a shot? It was Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp is basically told that TMG is going to have to file a foreclosure action on one of his estates. So he goes ahead, apparently, and this is just from reading the court records, and he says, I don't want this in the press that my manager sued me for money. So I'm going to go after them. He files a suit against them for $50 million, I think it was 50, and says, you guys mismanaged all of my money. It was all your fault. There's no personal accountability at all by this. This is, again, some of the excess that's in here is extraordinary. He was spending $2 million a month. Every month, $2 million. Some of these, like I said, he had 14 residences, 40 full-time employees. And then he'd spend $150,000 a month just for security for his kids while they went to school.
Yeah, so you can understand why his creditors are pretty upset.
Yes.
You know, he could sell a couple of the houses maybe, you know, get rid of some of the private jets, sell a few of the cars, pay off that debt.
Right.
You know?
Now, the 70 collectible guitars and world-class jewelry, that one always throws me because how many guitars are you going to play? How about this? His collectibles of memorabilia. He has memorabilia from every, you know, so many famous people. Like, think about Marilyn Monroe, Marlon Brando, John Dillinger. All of these folks, he has 12 storage facilities,
Wow.
all that hold and archive this memorabilia. And he pays over $1 million just for the storage of his memorabilia.
Probably has to be kept somewhere. A lot of it might even have to be in like airtight, secure, safe type
sure.
storage. You know, if you have like paintings that are worth a lot of money, so you know, some place to keep them obviously in safe hands. So that's
Right.
got to be a huge expense in itself.
Right, but how about wine?
Yeah.
Wine, he blew so much money on.
He loves fine wine.
Yes.
Apparently.
Now, how much do you think a good bottle of wine is? Like one that you would like?
I don't know. I mean, a really, really nice, maybe, you know, a couple $100 if
Wow,
it's imported.
that's really good. All right, see, maybe I don't have the same taste as you.
It can be
I
way
could-
cheaper than that, though.
All right, I can
It
get
doesn't
by-
need to be a couple $100.
Wow. All right, I can get by on a $30 bottle all day, every day. That's per bottle, you know, and I don't really drink that much at
Yeah.
all. So how about if I were to say $30,000 worth of wine, you would say, yeah, that is a lot of wine.
To be drinking an awful lot.
Right, but get this, that $30,000 isn't just how much he spent on wine. It's not how much he spent on wine in a year. That's how much he spends every month on wine. So
That's insane.
right. Now again, forgive me, I don't know Johnny Depp personally, but when he shows up as the character who's, you know, all wobbly and funny, it may
Captain
be
Jack Sparrow.
Jack
Yeah,
Sparrow may
that's
be
the-
drinking some of that great wine. $30,000 a month must be excellent wine. So he had a spending problem, clearly. Now, he hasn't filed yet. Why not? Well, it's simple. All he has to do is stop spending. I don't know what his debts are, but there becomes a point where all I know that he owes is $5 million to TMG. Now, TMG has every right in the world to basically say, look, you sell something. Give us some of this. Assign some of the money that you're going to get from this next movie to us. Just please make us whole. And I'm not trying to say that I'm favorable to creditors. I don't know anything about TMG. But you know, Johnny Depp says, I don't want to. So if, though, there was a situation, and now here's where I'm bringing it back to us and real folks, you know, where there's a situation where your debts are high, but your cash flow, you're normally able to continue to pay off your cash flow, use your cash flow to pay off your debts. Maybe it's the minimum, maybe you can make some extra payments, but there becomes a point where maybe that isn't possible. Or there comes a point where the creditor says, I don't just want the minimum payments. You owe me the whole thing all at once. We can't do that. And that happens when there's a foreclosure, a garnishment, lots of things that they can do. They can go after your car, they can go after other assets. And we're not just talking about letters and lawsuits. I'm talking about one day you go to your bank account and try to withdraw some money and you say, what happened? It's all zeros. Because they got what's called a FIFE and they went after your bank account. They can garnish your accounts. They could just be gone. So people have to have the ability to, I'll say, I don't use the word fight, but to protect their rights. Okay.
Right.
So today, though, we are taking a lighthearted attitude. So, and there will be some instruction in here about, you know, what to do for bankruptcy for you and, you know, for other folks. But I still want to cover other celebrities. There's still more gossipy things. So I want to cover some.
Stuff.
Okay. How about this? Other famous people that have filed for bankruptcy. Now,
Got 50 Cent.
50 Cent.
That's the one that's
Perfect
pretty big
example.
right now.
That's a great example. In fact, let me cover that one. So 50 Cent, you know, there's a great story with him where he was rolling around or sitting with piles of money all around him, and the court, or at least attorneys, got really upset, and they said, hey, this is, you know, what are you doing here? If you're filing for bankruptcy, you should be rolling around with all this money all around you. And he says, oh, no, that was just fake. It was just for appearances. And it's true. There are companies that make fake bills and stacks of bills and all that. But it still didn't sit the right way. I mean, there's a trustee who's looking at this saying, what are you doing here? You know, this is kind of an embarrassment for the court. Even though he was following all the right procedures, it still didn't look right. All right, but was 50 Cent penniless? See, and that's the great thing we've got to cover. Bankruptcy does not mean broke. All right, there's a huge difference. Insolvency and broke, totally different. So let's talk about a couple of them. What do you know about like 50 Cent today? Is he broke? Is he?
I don't think he's homeless. I don't think he's broke. But
Yeah.
I don't think he pretty much all he has, I guess now, is whatever equity he has, which is all probably has loans on it. So he's obviously in a financial situation where he can't. He's in danger of losing what he has, but it doesn't mean that he can't sustain it for longer and just keep piling more debt. So he's maybe got a nice house or a mansion or whatever else, but it's not, there's nothing solid to back that. So eventually it's all going to just, go away.
Well, that's interesting though, but you know what? He actually today is listed as one of the top 5 wealthiest R&B artists in the entire world.
So
he's worth over $115 million right now. So, but he filed for bankruptcy. It wasn't because he was broke. It was because there were certain payments that were due at a certain date, and he tried to negotiate with his creditors, and they said, no, you're 50 Cent, you got the money, pay us. But the thing is, he would have had to have sold off a lot of a lot of income-producing assets.
Right.
Didn't he invest in, vitamin water? Right?
He did all kinds of stuff, I think.
Yeah.
I didn't realize
he actually is a very bright guy.
Yeah. I mean, he had all kinds of different business ventures, I guess, But, I mean, I didn't realize that he had been able to bounce back that quickly. I thought it was more like, he was still kind of in financial trouble, but I guess.
Okay, and that's actually the thing I want to clear up. When you say bounce back, again, it feeds into this understanding that he was close to being broke, and that he came close to the edge, and that somehow he's made some great recovery. But that actually is not at all what happened. See, he actually had the sale of vitamin water before, and all of those things, he had large debts, he had large assets, and it was a cash flow issue. So imagine if he has, let's just assume, I'm going to come up with an asset and say he has a hotel, and the hotel is worth $100 million hotel. But every single month, there's income, right? There's profit, and it pays out, I'll say, $10,000 a month. But it's worth $100 million.
Yep.
Now, the debt on that, who knows what it is? Let's say $50 million. He has, if the mortgage is 50 and he has $100 million value, then he has $50 million of equity. But the only way he'll get that equity and be able to spend it is if he were to sell the asset or to refinance it. That is not easy to do.
No.
But as I said, he was kicking off $10,000 a month. Well, if all of a sudden, his creditors, the bills are, $10,000 a month exactly, what happens if attendance at his hotel, the vacancy goes down for a month or two? Well, he still has millions, tens of millions of assets, but the cash flow was just crunched. And that happens with a lot of people, folks that have a job and they're paying all of their bills and they have assets, but if they become unemployed or if they get hurt, something unexpected happens, like a medical debt, all of a sudden you get hit with this big expense and you say, oh man, I'd have to sell the house, I have to sell. You don't have to always do that. And that's why there are provisions like Chapter 13, Chapter 11. These are ways in which people can work through those systems. In fact, there's a comment up. And by the way, I do want to encourage you guys to comment and write us questions. Here's a good comment that came in here. It says, 50 Cent is definitely not broke, but he didn't want to settle the debt and expenses. He just wanted to get rid of unnecessary debt. And by the way, that's also true. Let's talk about unnecessary debt. Everybody thinks that, I don't want to say everybody, but creditors want you to think that every single debt that you have is correct. That's not right. Think about how many times someone has said you've owed them money, or they mistook you for someone else, or someone has tried to gouge you. If you don't respond to a lawsuit in time, the plaintiff wins.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you an example.
A lot of it's about timing too.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah. Talk about that then.
Well, I mean, I've heard that. Like, I know somewhat about like the Chapter 13 bankruptcies, I guess, where you have, I think, 30-day window or something to be able to go ahead and file before they have the court date.
Right. So it's really once you're sued is the best example. So let's come up with a situation. I can sue you for anything. I mean, I hate to say it, but that is the world we live in. People are allowed to file lawsuits. So if I sue my good friend Adria here,
Let's hope you wouldn't do that.
I know. Well, she's going to lend me $5 million, so clearly I'm not doing that. So if I were to sue you for something, who knows what, breach of contract, and we never had a contract, right? If I sued you for, running over my dog,
I wouldn't do that.
I don't even have a dog, okay? Actually, I do, but for this purpose, I don't. My point is, if I were to file against you, I file, let's say, in Cobb County Superior Court. Someone comes up to you and says, "Oh, are you Adria Maroney? Here, I'm here to serve you." You say, "Thanks," and you put it away somewhere. 30 days go by. If you do not show up in court on that 30th day or file any answer, I automatically win.
Right. So you have to be quick. Act quick if you have a bankruptcy notice.
Right. Well, a notice of any lawsuit.
That's
right.
If
someone is going after you for any lawsuit of any type,
foreclosure.
Yes, you have to respond quick. So here's the situation where I had a totally bogus claim against Adria. It was made up. There were no facts to support it. And if we actually had to go in front of the judge, I would completely lose. But if she didn't do anything, then I win. And there's no way this win is a win-win. It doesn't get undone. There's no way to overturn it, appeal it. It is default. It's not even subject to being appealed. Okay? Done. So then for the next 5-10 years, I keep going after you. I already got the judgment, guys. So I was talking earlier about statutes of limitations. You have to file on a contract within 7 years. Or if there's an injury that's a tort, you have to usually sue within 1 to 2 years. But now that I got a judgment, that stays with you for life. So if you leave this firm and you go off to, become a celebrity doing, making millions every year, that's, well, of course we would hope. But if that happens, I still have that judgment against you, so I can later come and foreclose against you on any asset that she has. You can see that it can lead to some very cruel and illogical results. So anyway, bringing it back to the 50-cent example, those are some debts that are not legitimate, or at least that he felt were not legitimate. Someone may have tacked on interest and penalties or all sorts of, said that instead of owing $1 million, they say, well, he actually owed me $20 million. Well, until he has his day in court, or maybe he did and he didn't respond in time. I don't know what the facts were in his case, but either way, you have to be able to have this option to go into bankruptcy court and say, I can't pay it all, and I shouldn't have to pay it all, so force him to work with me. All right, let's cover a couple of others. All right, I don't want to get too deep into these details. Oh, hold on, here's a question. How could 50 Cent file bankruptcy and still keep all of his assets? House, car, music gear. I thought in order to get a bankruptcy approved, they'd had to forfeit all valuable assets. That's a great question, and there are two types of bankruptcies. There is a Chapter 7 and Chapter 13. So Chapter 7 is a way where you basically throw yourself at the court and you say, hey, any assets I have, take whatever the value is, and but just leave me enough where I can live out my normal lifestyle. And I mean in normal, the average, local person's lifestyle.
Not the Johnny Depp lifestyle.
Not, God, I would trade money for his $600 million. Come on, that's great.
Yeah.
But right, so like in Georgia, where we're at, the average income is $45,000. So $45,000, the court says, look, there's certain expenses that you're going to have. You're going to need $500 a month for a car. You're going to need $800 a month for housing. You're going to need $400 a month for, let's say, kids' clothes. You're allowed to keep all of that money. You only have to give up any excesses. So if you had, a really expensive car, if you had a really, ultra expensive house, when you file for Chapter 7, in 2 months perhaps, you can be done and cleared out of all of the debts. There's no plan. You're not working with creditors. You are just wiping out all of your debts and getting a totally fresh start. But the other type is a Chapter 13. Now, Chapter 11 is usually for companies, and that's what 50 Cent used. there's a reason he used it. It's kind of fitting a square peg into a round hole, but it worked for his situation. Most folks file 13s. A 13 is a payment plan. You get to keep your house. You keep your car. As this question is, you get to keep your expensive music gear, your car, and your house. But what you're doing is you're working out a plan where you pay it all off over 3 years, 4 years, and the most is 5. Sometimes creditors only get 10 cents on the dollar. Remember, you're allowed to keep a certain amount to live off of each month. So it's just trying to shed off some of the excesses. All right, other famous folks. There are some funny ones. Do you know others?
Basinger?
Sorry?
I've heard of the Kim Basinger.
Oh, yeah, Basinger. Yeah, Kim Basinger.
Yeah.
Well, you're too young to even know who Kim Basinger is. Come on.
That's why I couldn't get the name pronunciation.
Oh, God. Kim Basinger. She was, she used to be married to Tom Cruise.
I did hear that.
Okay.
Yeah, I knew that much.
She was a famous actress. I say was. She still is. But I think in her story, she backed out of a movie. And that was it. See, she signed on to a contract to do a movie. She read the script and then started talking with people and said, this thing's terrible. I don't want to do this. And so she decided, guys, I'm backing out.
She gets sued, obviously.
They sued her. And I don't know, let's say they sued her for $20 million. Well, they won. Did she back out? Yes. Maybe they had a contract that said that she owed $20 million. So judge says, hey, it's pretty straightforward here. You owe $20 million. Well, that's kind of awful in her situation. So she says, well, I'll just have to work out a payment plan. Mm-hmm. And she did over a couple of years. But then after that, she went on to do a number of excellent movies. Here's some others. We talked about Mike Tyson. Now, Mike Tyson is one of those stories. I mean, look, some of these are spending issues that, and we all can get caught up in, but these are famous, riches to rags kind of stories. But Mike Tyson had, hundreds of millions he would get paid almost $100 million for one fight towards the end of his career. Mm. But he did spend a lot of it and then filed for bankruptcy, but now he's reemerging in a lot of different venues. I mean, he has a couple of projects going on. There's MC Hammer, another famous one. Kind of similar story. Let's talk about Curt Schilling.
Oh, I haven't heard about that.
Okay, Curt Schilling, the Red Sox had not won the World Series for 86 years. And all these Red Sox fans, including my grandfather, by the way, we all thought that if the Red Sox ever win the World Series, they're all going to pass away because they've all been waiting, hanging on for this one thing to happen. Well, the Red Sox finally came back and won. They were down 3-0, all right? And then they went 4 straight games to win. And the hero, Curt Schilling. Curt Schilling had a bloody sock. It's a great story.
Did he just get that,
he was a pitcher, and
yeah,
he got hurt, and but he played through it with the bloody sock. The bloody sock is worth a lot of money. He had to sell the bloody sock. No, people paid a lot of money for the bloody sock.
Just put it on eBay and auction it off. I wonder how much that went for.
Yeah, if anyone knows how much the bloody sock went
let
for,
us know in the comments.
Please write in. We'd love to see that. But what he did is he had $140 million. He went out on top. After winning the World Series, he says, all right, I'm going to start a sports, like EA Sports. I'm going to do video games based on baseball and other things. I mean, think about how famous like John Madden football is. He's thinking, well, I'm Curt Schilling. I could do this. Mm-hmm. So he poured $50 million in, and at the end of the day, the sports company did not take off. And so he filed for bankruptcy. But look, he's not out of a job. He's an ESPN analyst. And but this happens. Someone tries to start a business. You know where it happens a lot in our situation? Franchises. There are so many franchises where these franchisors prey on people sometimes, and they say, look, if you can take out a big loan, we'll help you. You get SBA funding. But they have to put up their personal assets to guarantee this loan, their car, their house. And they take out a $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 loan. They open up their store or service. But then what happens is it doesn't pan out. It's not as successful as the franchisor thought or told them it would be. And so a lot of those folks, through trying to make the American dream, have to end up filing bankruptcy. But you know what? Again, it's not the end, because a lot of people, how many people start businesses and then It's not the first one. It's not the second one. It's the third that really takes off. Have you ever heard of Walt Disney?
Oh, yeah.
All right, that's a famous one. Walt Disney started his first production company. Didn't take off. Walt Disney filed bankruptcy.
Now, I remember hearing a story about that where they said, basically told him that he was crazy, that, what he was doing wasn't going to work.
Right.
And, sometimes it takes a couple of times and maybe even trial and error to figure out, what it is that really does work. But I think he's a really good example of that.
Oh, absolutely. And no one in the world is ever going to suggest that Walt Disney isn't wildly talented and successful.
Yeah.
It just happened to be that his first attempt to start the company, it just didn't take off. So then he did get together with his brother, and together they started Walt Disney Company, and that has been growing ever since. Maybe you heard of a guy named Henry Ford. Same exact story. He started a company in the 20s. It didn't take off. Filed for bankruptcy, and then after his personal bankruptcy, he started Ford Motor Company. And that's when famously he said, you can buy this car in any color you want as long as it's black, which I think is a hilarious line still. Other famous folks, again, doesn't have to be a rags to riches and riches to rags story, but divorce can also hit a lot of people.
And that was part of the Johnny Depp thing, too. Part of the reason why he's in financial trouble because of his recent divorce.
That's true. You're right. What was her name? Amanda Heard, right?
Amber Heard.
Amber. Okay, got it. Hey, maybe you can help me with something. I got to check this note here. So one of the things that Johnny Depp did, this just cracked me up. He had spent a ton of money to fire. God, this is sad. If anyone knows who Hunter Thompson is, I can't think of who that is.
I don't know.
Johnny Depp. This is in the complaint. Okay, sorry, and this is just hilarious. Here we go. Johnny Depp paid $3 million to fire the ashes of author Hunter Thompson over Aspen, Colorado.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I wonder who this Hunter Thompson guy is.
And why would he fire his ashes over...
I'm very confused about that.
Right. Is it someone that he liked or someone he really hated?
It sounds kind of like he hates the guy if he's trying to fire him.
Maybe.
Or his ashes.
He could buy his ashes and then shoot him over Aspen?
It's a little weird.
That is. Okay, so back to other folks. Mark Twain. Mark Twain filed for bankruptcy. Francis Ford Coppola. Meatloaf. Please tell me you know who Meatloaf is.
Yeah.
Okay,
kind
good.
of.
Paradise by the Dashboard Light. Great song. Tom Petty.
Is that an oldie? Yeah,
oh my
it's
God.
An oldie.
It's not too old. Tom Petty, okay. Famous, wonderful artist. Wayne Newton, Mr. Las Vegas. He filed for bankruptcy. Let's see. Who else? Burt Reynolds.
Yeah.
Cyndi Lauper.
Yeah.
You know Cyndi Lauper and Burt Reynolds?
I do know who they are. You're not doing too bad here.
Okay. Did you ever see Smokey and the Bandit?
Yes.
Thank God. Okay.
One of my friends made me watch it because he was saying that it was such a classic, so I had to see it apparently.
It's a classic. It's not a great classic, but it's a classic. Gary Coleman, same story. Larry King.
Oh yeah, Larry King.
Larry King. And you know why? Divorce. A lot of these guys, look, a divorce is just devastating. Nobody wants that, but when you have a divorce, you may still have so much in debt. Like, I'll give you an example of how it could happen. I could get, let's say if I have a mortgage, and the mortgage is, $300,000 mortgage, and the house is worth, let's say $400,000. And that's all I've got as far as assets or liabilities. And then there's a divorce. My wife and I, God forbid, we separate and get divorced, and ultimately they split the house. Okay. The bank does not care that we just got divorced. The bank says, hey, we're still owed $300,000. Well, suddenly, if the court awards the house to her, that means that $100,000 of equity is now sent to her. The $300,000 of debt, still mine. Or if they force a sale, the sale will generate, usually you would think $100,000, but then there's fees and commissions.
Court costs and all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah. So let's say we net $60,000. Great, I've got $60,000, but I have a debt of $300,000. Some of those, and because let's say the house is awarded to, let's say, her, divorce can really hurt, and it forces a lot of folks into bankruptcy. So it often happens right after that. Let's see if there's any other famous folks. This is more of a quiz.
I think we have a couple of questions
let's
here
see.
that just came in.
All right.
is it possible to bankrupt a private school loan?
Right. Like Sally Mae. Okay, that's interesting. So generally, Sally Mae loans are federally backed, and as you can expect, the federal government carves out special rules for themselves where you cannot get the entire debt thrown out. But what you could do is get on more attractive payment plans. So, same happens with taxes. It's funny, if you ever are put in a spot where you have to decide, let's say you get a tax refund and you've got a $2,000 tax refund and you got two bills in front of you. You got the IRS and you've got your credit card company. Now you would say, the credit card company is charging me 28% a month in interest. The IRS is only charging me 12% of interest. You would think that it would be smart to pay off the higher interest one. Absolutely not. You want to pay off the IRS. You want to pay off your student loans. Mm-hmm. Those are the types of things where you can't get easy relief from. Things that are like credit cards are unsecured debts. So unsecured debts are credit cards. If you get just a signature loan at a bank. Frankly, a lot of car loans. Now, car loans are secured by the car, right? But any amounts above that, you don't have to usually securitize with something. So I'll give you an example of like a car loan. So if you get a used car, and let's say the car is worth $10,000, and you finance the whole thing. Well, as they say, as soon as you drive it off the lot, it's worth less. Mm-hmm. Well, you still owe $10,000 because that's the loan you signed. So a repo company could come out and repossess the vehicle. It's funny, especially in Georgia, it's very simple. If they see the car and you owe on it, they can use self-help. They don't have to wait and file with the court. They simply drive out there with the tow truck, pick up the car, and drive away with it.
I actually had a friend that happened to. He thought he had automatic payments set up on his car, and apparently it just disappeared out of his driveway one morning. Went out to go to work, and it wasn't there, and found out that the payments had not been going through.
Yep.
So,
well,
it's wild.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something. That's another thing about with car loans, that these buy here, pay here places, they actually kind of like it. They want you to have a situation where you don't pay because they can resell that car over and over and over again. They tack on a fee. See, usually, if you're buying a $10,000 car, they're not giving you a loan for $10,000. Typically, you're having to put something down. Let's say $3,000 down. Well, if they come out and repossess you because you missed the first payment, they're keeping your $3,000. Then they put that car back out on the lot, and they still have all those interest and amounts they can go after you for, but then they do it to another guy and another. It's funny, your car can get recycled over and over again sometimes. Yeah. Here's a comment that the BK can't stop the student loan garnishment, right, but doesn't get rid of the debt. Well, okay, and that's a good point. Maybe I should be more clear about that. So the student loan debt does not go away, and that was really the point I was making. But correct, it does stop garnishments. See, actually, let me explain why bankruptcy has the power to stop collection efforts and things like a garnishment. As soon as you file, immediately the second you file, what happens is a federal court issues basically what's called a restraining order. It stops every creditor from pursuing you. It is called the automatic stay. The automatic stay is easily the most powerful thing that exists for consumers to fight back. That automatic stay says, you can't call me anymore. Don't send me another letter. Don't try to pursue a lawsuit against me. Everything has to just stop. So if you have a creditor who's been garnishing or is about to garnish you, second you file, that garnishment stops. And even there are some cases, if you file, we might be able to get back some of the money that you already have had garnished from you. So a lot of cases we're able to get some of that back. So the automatic stay is very powerful. In fact, I'm going to compare and contrast this for a second. When people run into debt, one of the first things they often try to do is they'll say, oh, well, let me look online what my options are. And there's a bunch of them. There's debt consolidation, there are debt settlements. I mean, you're familiar, right? Have you seen a lot of these, ads?
Yeah.
Okay. And they advertise where? Like a TV,
radio, you even see them online, Facebook.
Okay. Generally, what are the messages that they would say?
Just erase your debt, stop creditors from calling you.
Right. I understand they're not attorneys. But what they're saying is, look, you're having to deal with it. You're not a pro at this. Don't worry. Let us do this for you. We'll negotiate on your behalf. But here's the thing. Those creditors don't have to work with any of these debt consolidation. See, debt consolidation or debt settlement is not a solution. It is I'll call it a convenience, where you're asking somebody else to kind of take care of things for a little while, but it doesn't stop the emergencies. Like, for example, if one of your creditors is already at the point where they've sued you, debt settlement is not going to stop that lawsuit. It can't. They have no power to stop a lawsuit. It won't stop a garnishment. It won't stop a foreclosure. It won't stop your car from being repossessed. It just doesn't have that kind of effect. So the automatic stay does. There is nothing more powerful than the automatic stay. Now, I know not everybody wants to just jump into bankruptcy. A lot of folks say they come into bankruptcy because they've already tried a debt settlement or a debt resolution, and they've said, I paid so much in fees. It did nothing. In fact, all of my debts, they don't go away. They keep tacking on interest and penalties, and it grows and it grows. It is like putting on blinders where you're just ignoring it. There's a couple of problems that you just have to keep in mind. Please, if you know nothing else about debt settlement or debt resolution companies, I would say take these three things away. One, the fees are extraordinary. And they say, oh, well, you don't pay us anything, usually, other than a small $100 a month fee. But we get a portion of whatever we save you. Well, in concept, it sounds great. If you owe $10,000 to one credit company and they are able to get it cut in half, now you only owe $5,000. What this company is going to do is they're going to say, well, we saved you $5,000, and so you pay us a portion of the $5,000 you saved. So that still means you're paying a lot, about a whole bunch of it. The other thing is it could take months and years. The average debt settlement plan is 5 years long. So you're talking, this isn't like a Chapter 7 where you make a filing, in a couple of months you're all done with all of your debts and there's finality. No, you walk away, you're for 5 years possibly in these payment plans. And the fees, every month, that $100 a month fee, plus the 30% they're saving you, it really adds up. And here's the worst part, the stinger about that is, you're going to get taxed on that. Now, that sounds odd. Wait, what do you mean I'm getting taxed? If your credit card company writes down your debt at all, that amount of debt that they wrote off, you have to pay for taxes.
Because they count that as income, right? Because if they're taking something off of what you owe, that would technically be considered, finances that you're receiving.
It's something that you're getting of value. Mm-hmm. And writing off debt, forgiveness of debt, is called income. So you could be very happy looking forward to your next refund, and then the, let's say, Visa or Amex or whoever who has basically written off, $10,000 of your debt, all of a sudden they file a 1099, and then when you go to file your taxes, you say, oh, I'm getting a big refund. I can't wait. It's going to be $2,000 refund. And you say, wait a second. Where did this extra $10,000 of income come from? I have to pay tax on that. Now you go from having a refund to now you owe money. And it shocks a lot of people. It doesn't happen in bankruptcy. In bankruptcy, if that is written off or wiped out in bankruptcy, and that's really, bankruptcy wipes out debt, whereas credit settlement basically is a negotiated deal just between the two parties. There's no filings with any courts, but you pay tax on that. You don't in bankruptcy. So that is a big hit. Second big thing to remember is it's totally voluntary for the creditors. Bankruptcy is involuntary, meaning they all have to participate. So if you have 5 credit cards and let's say a bank loan and an auto loan, 7 different people that you have to negotiate with. If you did a debt settlement, a lot of these companies will say, no, sorry, we just don't do any settlements at all. Famous, well-known ones, American Express, they will not do settlements, and a whole bunch of others. So here you may resolve 3 of your debts. When I say resolve, lower or get into a payment plan, and this, by the way, it does hit your credit dramatically, and that's another misunderstanding, but you have gotten nowhere with your other ones. And let's say it takes 2 years or 3 years to even strike that deal. All along, your debt goes from here to here to here. The interest and penalties are all piling up. So you started with a $10,000 debt, and then when they negotiate, they say, oh, we'll cut down this new $20,000 debt down to 10. You would have been better off just getting rid of the 10 in a bankruptcy and wiping it out totally. And then here's a third thing to keep in mind, that these bankruptcies, like I said, they take a lot of time, that they're, as I said, they're expensive, that you get taxed on them, they're voluntary, but here's the thing, they hurt your credit dramatically, and I was just teasing that a moment ago, but your credit is going to have trouble regardless. I have to admit that bankruptcy hurts your credit. There are ways to rebuild it, but also having 30 days late and then 60 days late, 90 days late, by the time you're working with the group and there's a garnishment or a foreclosure or an eviction, all of those have hit your credit already as well. But once you get through bankruptcy, there is no better person to lend to than someone who just finished a bankruptcy. It's funny because oddly, credit card companies say, oh, you're done with bankruptcy, your debts were discharged. That means you have zero debt at all. And everything, you start off with a brand new slate, and if they extend you credit afterwards, they are far more likely to get repaid. So actually you can get secured lines of credit. You can start rebuilding your credit the very next day. In fact, if you put down a $400 deposit at any place, I mean, at a bank, they'll give you a secured card. So you can use that card at any restaurant, any hotel. No one knows the difference. And you're rebuilding your credit from that point on. Okay, well, we've covered a lot. It has been an hour.
It has been.
I've enjoyed this. Any last questions?
I mean, I think we've covered about all of them. Let's see if we have any new ones here. How long does the automatic stay last?
I'll tell you real fast. It lasts as long as you need it to last. I can't put it a better way. The minute you file, it is instantaneous. It is automatic. The automatic stay lasts until either the court says, sorry, we're not going to give you the discharge. You didn't finish all the steps of the bankruptcy. You didn't give us your taxes, returns. You didn't give us your W-2s. And so they throw out the case. Or if they do allow your debts to be wiped out, and then the automatic stay goes away. So it lasts as long as you need it. All right, listen, we're going to do more of these. We thank you so much for joining us for this. We look forward to next week where we will bring out a new topic.
Yeah, we'll find something interesting. I thought maybe about doing one that's focused on presidents, because I have heard there's quite a few, actually. I know we talked about Abe Lincoln and Jefferson, so that could be next week.
Yeah, and there's many others. In fact, there are a bunch of presidents that had filed bankruptcy.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, like I said, it is part of our Constitution. It was originally in the Bible. It is something that is designed to help everybody. So we thank you so much. As we always say, this isn't legal advice per se for any individual. It's just great stories for us to share and things to talk about.
Johnny Depp and all of his crazy stuff that we all wish we could have, yachts,
or $600 million of assets.
$600 million of assets.
It's not bad. All right, listen, guys, thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye, y'all.